Hello, everybody, and welcome into another Hockey Bears Roundtable breaking news edition. We've got a big trade that just went down as we're recording this and just got finalized pretty much. I mean, there may be a couple things added, little things, but big deal coming down the pike. We got a three-way trade. These are always crazy between the Carolina Hurricanes, Colorado Avalanche, and Chicago Blackhawks. Most of these because there has to be an extra team to take on extra salary and stuff like that. So the deal is Mikko Rantanen, Taylor Hall going to the Carolina Hurricanes, Martin Necas, Jack Drury going to the Colorado Avalanche, and the Blackhawks getting a third round pick, and they are taking on 50% of Mikko Rantanen's salary. So the piece that's moving from the Blackhawks, of course, is Taylor Hall. And they're pretty much just getting a third round pick in that trade. But they're a big salary retention type deal there, taking on a lot of Rantanen's salary. So that's the probably the biggest trade of the season so far, I would say, Jacob.
Oh,
What do you
without
think
a doubt.
about this guy, this one here?
Well, I think that there's a clear loser in this, and I think it's easy to start with them. It's the Chicago Blackhawks. I mean, you're retaining 4.75 million, I think it is, on Mikko Rantanen, and you're trading Taylor Holloway, and Taylor Hall's not what he once was. Like he's about a 40 to 50 point winger right now, and not a play driver, but he's a great complementary piece. But like, you're only getting a third round pick for Taylor Hall and like almost $5 million in salary.
Yeah.
That's a loss. I think with the Avalanche, they're not making this deal unless they know that they're not bringing Rantanen back. I'm not thrilled about the return on their behalf. Necas is fantastic. Drury is a good up and coming center. He's gonna cap out as probably a third liner, even like just a high end fourth liner, and then a second and a fourth. A bit underwhelming. But for Carolina, like you're not giving up a first round pick. You're not giving up Alexander Nikishin, or Scott Morrow or anything like that. So
Yeah.
I think that's a huge win for them.
For sure, and you're getting ridiculously, legitimate first line winger. Rantanen can also play center. He's done that in the past with the Avalanche, and actually has a pretty good faceoff percentage in his career. So I mean, he could actually slot in as a center, and the Hurricanes apparently have been looking for a second line center. I don't know if that's where he's going to play, but if he can go between those two positions, and he's just lethal. He's been lethal with McKinnon. I would say he could probably be lethal with Sebastian Aho as well. I mean, that's a pretty good combination. And then Taylor Hall. I mean, it's not the Taylor Hall of old. We all know that, but he can still produce, and I mean, playoff guy going forward too. Brandon's a big piece there, though. I mean, the question is, though, do you see the Hurricanes re-signing him to an extension, or is this going to be another Jake Gensel type thing?
I think because they went through it with Jake Ensel last year, they're not doing it unless they know they're going to throw the book at him.
Yeah. No, that's true. I mean, I think they want to lose another thing like this where they give up so much. And I mean, they're giving up a lot more in this trade than they did for Gensel. But Necas, of course, we all know this the saga that went on with him in the offseason, with them signing him. They eventually did sign him, not long term. So I mean, maybe he had a foot out the door. Maybe they were already looking at trading him. He had a hot start this season. It's kind of slowed down lately. But going to Colorado, he's gonna. I mean, he's gonna have a chance to play with McKinnon, which is a pretty good guy to play with. Does this shift the power balance in the East now with Rantanen joining the Hurricanes?
I don't think so. I think the Hurricanes were already a part of that. And obviously this makes them better. I don't know if it pushes them over the edge just because they lost Nietzsche and they lost Drury, who Drury's not the most impactful player, but he worked really well on that fourth line. And he did play higher in the lineup and played well. Um, they're definitely a better team. I don't think it puts them in the next echelon of Stanley Cup contenders. I think they just bumped themselves up a little bit. Among the top of the East. But I mean, you look in the West and you got Vegas who's dominant, you got Edmonton who's dominant. I think the Stanley Cup is headed east this year, or headed west this year. But Carolina's certainly up there in that conversation.
Yeah, they sure got a lot of weapons now, adding Ranton into the mix. And Hull, I mean, like I say, is pretty useful still. Chicago, I mean, Hull was probably not a long-term piece there. And like you said, it really, they lost I mean, I don't know. I mean, taking on 50% of the salary is pretty big. And then just getting a third round pick, maybe a little underwhelming for them. And then, I mean, Colorado, they got a good piece. I don't know how much it's gonna be. Are they a less? What do you see the impact going? I mean, obviously losing Rantanen's pretty big. I mean, McKinnon and Rantanen have been dynamic duo for many years now. Does this make the Avalanche a weaker team? I mean, they're not guaranteed a playoff spot right now either.
Yeah, I think they're definitely a weaker team. When you trade the best player in a deal, you're always going to be a weaker team, regardless of how much depth or how many other players you bring in. But I do really like what it does for their depth. I mean, bringing in Jack Drury, obviously we've seen all the injuries that they've dealt with.
Mhm.
He's going to be a really good bottom six piece for them, and Necas is just going to take over the same role as Rantanen to a lesser extent, of course. Um, so yeah, I still think that they make the playoffs. I don't think this is a end of the like. I don't think they're done.
Mm.
Um, and just calling it quits on this season. I'm just pulling up the wild card race. They're in the first wild card spot right now, and they have 8 points on Vancouver, who sits outside the wild card. So they're pretty cemented into a wild card spot, and certainly could move into the um top three in the Central too. They're only 2 points behind Minnesota for second, so I think they're definitely in a playoff spot by the end of this year. It's just kind of a we know we're going to lose this guy for nothing. Probably not our Stanley Cup year,
Mm.
looking at the roster. So let's just make sure that we don't lose him for nothing, and get the best return that we can.
Yeah, and Nate just says he has a contract too. He's got term, not long, but he is guaranteed for next season too. So they got a guy that they know they will have. Ranton is going to be expensive. 14 million is I think the last number that was thrown out there. I Carolina's going to have a big push, and Sebastian Aho apparently is going to lead the lobbying in that to get him signed. So if they can get him signed, that's a great piece for moving forward for Hurricanes. So we'll see what happens. Just to finish, we all know with JT Miller as the next probably big name that's kind of been talked about. Elias Pettersson, of course, hasn't been taken completely off the board as being a trade candidate too. Does this take the Hurricanes out of the JT Miller running? And or could they potentially even make that deal too?
I don't think. I mean, yes, it probably does, but I don't think it has to. I think that there is still a path that they could acquire JT Miller. It all depends on what the Canucks are looking for in return. There's been a report that the Hurricanes said absolutely no to Necas in a deal with Miller. Does that mean that Vancouver's going to kind of settle with Kotkaniemi and maybe Scott Morrow and another pick or something? Or does it mean that they're, I don't know. But I think that they definitely do have the potential to make a deal still. Like they still have the assets, they still have the future cap space. I think the Hurricanes have like 35 million dollars in cap space for
Mm.
next year. If they move out Kotkaniemi, that's a little over 4 million. Obviously, you're gonna have $8 million for JT Miller, and then probably another 13 for Rantanen. So like it's gonna be hard to do, and that's gonna be a lot of cap space. But I don't think it's impossible for the Hurricanes to do that, and I think it would be in their best interest. Rantanen, we talked about how he can play center. He's done fairly well at center.
Mm.
He's much better on the wing,
Yeah.
and that's the best place for him. So if they can get JT Miller in behind Sebastian Aho, I think you do it, like if it's an option. And whether it's going to take, like I said, if it's going to take Kotkaniemi, and Scott Morrow, again, as long as it's not including Nikishin, I think that it's a deal that you can try and figure out. And they do have other prospects. So like,
Mm.
we saw a few years ago, oh, what was the trade? The Hronik trade.
Mm.
They traded Bo Horvat for futures and then flipped those futures for um Philip Hronik. So
Yeah.
it's
True.
hard to limit a trade to saying like, no, we're not accepting futures for that because then if you want roster players, go out and use those futures for roster players. So I think the Canucks need to be all ears open. Sounds like they're not getting the offers that they're hoping for. But yeah, and then I don't know if you saw, but there's another report just kind of floating out there that Mikko Rantanen actually blocked a trade to Carolina last year,
Huh.
or last week, sorry, and eventually the Hurricane or the Avalanche just said, okay, Chicago's not on your no trade list, so we're either trading you to Chicago or Carolina, you pick. And so that's what I don't know who somebody from Barstool, which not the most reliable source, but somebody put it out there. So
Hmm. That's interesting. Yeah, you know, there's always these things floating around with what happens. But I mean, JT Miller, I think he is getting traded. It's just depending on where. And Hurricanes, yeah, like you said, it could definitely still be a possibility. They may have said no to Nate just because of like, well, we have this deal in the works with with for Rantanen. Maybe that's why. I don't know. But we'll see how it all plays out within the next probably month.
yeah.
It's this is probably going down in the next month, if at all. If not, I think this drags into the off season, but we'll see.
Yeah, and I mean, it's worth noting too. Obviously, when everybody thinks of Sidney Crosby and his future, they think of him going to Colorado to play with Nathan MacKinnon. And there's been a few reports out there saying the Avalanche aren't done. And Kevin Weeks just posted a picture of the skyline of Pittsburgh, like he always does. So could be something there. I don't know. That would be super exciting. But
That'd be a crazy trade too. I mean, Crosby, McKinnon playing together, that'd pretty amazing to see. So, this is the first salvo, I guess, in the big trades that could be coming in the next, before the deadline, which is in March, which we still got a lot of time before then. But thanks, Jacob, for coming on and reacting to this blockbuster trade, and this is definitely a blockbuster. Make sure to check out everything at thehogbears.com. All the reaction articles will be coming out on this, and anything else that's coming down the pipe here. So. Till next time, we'll see you in another episode.